see you all. We might have others pop in. I know some people said they're coming, but you never know what happens day to day. So thank you all for being here, and I'm so glad to see you. It's great to see your faces, even if you are in little boxes here.
Karen looks like she's frozen. What do you think happened?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure this out.
Okay.
I've got this weird screen up on the right-hand side, a thing going down, and I can't make it go away.
No.
So I don't know.
I know I will freeze when I lose internet in the woods, which may happen a couple times, but I'll be back.
Hey, Beth.
Our wonderful dork on the internet up here. It can be sketchy.
Here comes somebody new.
See the top of their head.
Oh, hi. Hi, Linda.
Billy, could you come down?
Carol, we can hear you.
Okay. Trying to make this weird
Carol.
thing go away.
Carol's coming in. There's Cher.
Cheryl.
Mhm.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi there. Got my wine.
Good.
I like this kind of book club.
I already had mine.
Good for you. You?
Functioning correctly. If
For
you
dinner.
go away, it would be great.
Oh, that's Carol.
Didn't think of that wine. Good idea.
This came up, and I can't make it go away.
Can never do that either. I have
All right. While everybody's still getting settled a little bit, did anybody get a chance yet? I know it was only today, but did anybody get a chance to watch the Netflix documentary?
I did watch it. It
Yes.
was very
A
good.
couple did. A couple did. What can you tell us? I got a little ways in, and then my husband got called to work, so I couldn't watch it all. But what are your thoughts? Is it worth it?
Oh, yeah. Very good.
It really sort of shows you what her life is like now after
Oh,
she's out of the White House. It was like a 43 stop book tour that she did.
Oh, my God.
Or 43, I mean, she was out and about for a long time. And they also follow a lot of the young ladies that she talked to that she was trying to encourage to see
But
positives in themselves and stuff.
I thought one of the best parts was all the clothes she was wearing for the book tour. She's really into the bling now.
That's funny. I didn't know there was a Netflix special on her.
Yep, it just came out today.
today, yeah.
You know, it makes sense that she's dressing differently now that she doesn't have to worry about how everyone perceives her and she can just be herself, you know?
Well, she has a stylist.
Well, yeah.
And she was in the film too.
She did say at one point she realized, like, I don't think she cared about her appearance that much, but she did realize it was another part of her voice, another way to express who she was. Too,
Her role.
Mhm.
And of course, now that the documentary came out, there's a renewed push for her to be the vice president with Biden, which won't
Did
ever
everybody
happen.
get to the end of the
No.
book? What did she say about that?
I haven't heard her say anything about that since that news came out, but yeah, she said it more than once that she's not interested in politics.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
I don't think she was ever interested in politics.
No,
I don't
that's
think so
why I
either.
don't think she would do
so.
it. No.
It was too much politics for her to get a garden, much less run for an office.
Right.
Mhm, mhm.
Too much politics to wear a sleeveless dress,
Yeah.
let alone a garden.
Well, I only got about a half hour in, but the part I did watch, I really enjoyed seeing how she was interacting with some of the young women that she was meeting. I thought that was really interesting. It sounds like they went further into that. But I really liked too seeing her brother and her mother as part of it. That was really interesting.
Especially the brother, after he's a big part of the book. So
yeah, and you could totally tell they're brother and sister. They look alike. Their mannerisms were a lot alike. That was fun to see.
Well, and in the video too, they do a lot of showing old pictures of them growing up and their home, their family, and I love pictures, and that part just really hit with me too.
Yeah. I love the pictures too. Any biographies that come to the library, even if it's not something I would read, I'm sitting there looking at the pictures before I put it back on. So I did ask the Obama office if Michelle could join us tonight.
Did you really?
Good work, Tracy.
Yeah.
I figured it was worth a try. It worked last month, but apparently she was busy. So, but this book, Becoming, has gone on to be one of the best-selling memoirs of all times. So, why do you think that is?
It read like fiction. I mean, it was a page turner.
Really?
For me,
No.
it was.
I think
I thought it was
people,
long.
I think people, partly because a lot of people can probably relate to it. You know, as I read it, she actually grew up in a larger space than I did, which I thought was interesting, with my two sisters. And just this whole, and obviously I had an easier time because I did not grow up Black, but this whole idea of being able to come from a position that one perceives or others perceive as being, you know, not probably likely to get very far, and being able to accomplish what she accomplished it does happen, and it is also encouraging. And I think that's part of the draw of her story.
That's part of the American dream.
What, Cher?
I said it's part of the American dream.
Right.
You'll come from nothing and you make something. So
I could relate to where she came from, because I lived on the south side of Chicago and saw a lot of those same things that she had gone through. And her grandfather, she mentioned, was a Pullman porter. And I lived in Pullman, that planned.
Oh my gosh.
And my grandfather worked for Pullman. He was a painter.
Oh, wow.
So could you picture the areas and everything she was talking about then?
Oh, sure. Euclid Avenue and everything. My grandparents didn't live very far from there. My maternal grandparents.
The one thing that I thought was really interesting was that she talks about being part of the Black experience, but she was much more middle class than a lot of Black experience. Yes. And that's the part that struck me as I was reading the book, was how like my family and all the white families her family was in fact, you know, with the concentration on education and the large extended family and the house and the garden and just everything was, you know, it certainly wasn't ghetto Black, let's put it that way.
It was very stable.
That was a lot of the Black experience at the South Side at that
time.
Right. You know, when she talks about the white flight, I grew up in a suburb there, but I remember that's all you heard about on the TV was the whites moving out and the Blacks taking over. And she did a wonderful job of talking about what.
Yeah, I lived through that.
And I think, you know, Linda, I agree with you that, you know, she definitely grew up in a middle class environment, but I think there was there was less of a ghetto then, I think, than there is now. I'm
probably right.
Sure. Yeah, but I feel like there was a lot more, there were a lot more job opportunities for not educated people in general, and certainly, you know, people on the South Side.
I think
is now.
I don't think we had the same huge income gap in the country in total, and probably in Chicago, that we have now. I mean, it's so apparent, that income gap and that educational opportunity gap that became larger and larger from the time she was little. until now too.
Totally agree, Jane.
Pardon me?
She had,
Totally agree.
Mm.
she had a stable life, but I think she was making the point they didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
Right.
You know, I mean, they did rent, and her father was, you know, a blue uniform worker at the lakeshore, you know, working on the boilers, and the mother home, you know, homemaker. So
Well, they said that he was with the Water Reclamation District,
Yes.
and he didn't have the opportunity to join a trade. That was a big difference. My dad came back from the war and was able to become an electrician, but the opportunity to join the trade unions was
Just
not there
closed
for
to
them.
them. Yeah.
True.
Well, she talked
had
today
to,
in her in the documentary about her grandfather. Her grandfather was very intelligent. He was in the service, but when he came home, he wasn't allowed. He didn't have the money or the background to get into college, and so he ended up as a Pullman porter, and that sort of affected their family too. Was you know, he was told he couldn't do something.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was just struck. First of all, I thought her writing was beautiful. I was surprised, you know, you think a lawyer mind, yes, they're good with words, but I just think she was a great word craftsman. I was kind of surprised that it wasn't just reporting, but on top of that, she wove her words very well. But I really liked, I think just the lack of bitterness. You know, every African American I've known that I admire, it always surprises me how so much racism can be thrown at them, and yet they don't. My friends, at least that I've known personally, that I admire in this way, you know, that whole thing she's famous for, you know, when they go low, you go high. But, you know, the ability to do that time and time again, to kind of rise above the criticism, rise above you have to do things better, you have to work harder. I guess I came away from the book admiring her, that ability just to not submit to not to give in to the bitterness or the cynicism. I just appreciated that kind of part of the journey that she talked about.
You know, in the documentary, there's just a very little bit of the bitterness comes out, and it's directed towards the people of color and the older people and the women and the young people who didn't come out and vote during the elections, during the time he was president, when he really needed the votes to get Congress to change so he could get laws passed. That was the one little part where she said that was the most traumatic thing to her.
I think she also I remember the one, it was very short, but the one section paragraph where she talks about not being able to forgive Trump for riling up people, trying to, make it sound like her husband was not born in the United States and, was not this and not that. And the danger she felt that brought to her children, that would rile up people and put her children in danger. And that was, she said, I cannot forgive him, which I think is unusual, because I think she is the kind of person who did not hang on to hatred or, bad things that had happened, but she couldn't forgive him for that. Which I get.
She mentioned how the inauguration looked a lot different on the platform. No diversity, men, white, and she didn't smile. And she thought it was going to be more for what, elitists or something like that.
That was very interesting that she brought that out, but you could just almost feel that happening.
Yes.
So I read one review earlier today, and it said, this reviewer said, I grew up nothing like Michelle Obama, and yet I think every woman in America grew up something like Michelle Obama. You guys kind of touched on this, even with what you've said already, but would you agree with this? Were parts relatable to your own experience, and were other parts not?
Definitely.
When she's trying to juggle her children, her small children, and her job, and she had a husband that was making enough that she could not work, but she felt she should work, but yet she couldn't do it. And her husband was making time for himself, and she sort of resented him for that because she was trying to put everything towards her kids and her job. And I think that's something I definitely felt.
There was one thing I couldn't relate to at all. I'm not assertive. She definitely is an assertive person. Even in kindergarten, when she got the word wrong, white, the color, and she insisted the next day that she wanted to do the test over, and the teacher said no, and she insisted, so they did the test over. I thought, well, that would not have been me. But, you mentioned the good writing. She said she had always been a good storyteller, could use her imagination, could play with herself all day long, So, and she emphasizes people's stories. So I think that was important to her.
That's one thing I really liked, is it was an easy read because she was telling this story. And she went from different, activities and different stages of her life. And I think the way she wrote it, a lot of people that read that could always identify with one part of it, no matter what age, she was presenting there.
I'd like to know what people think about how honest she was about living with Barack before she was married, about the references to smoking pot, and clearly she was cohabitating. I mean, that's a pretty big risk, I think, for her to have taken when there's still so much of our country that will hold that against her, I think. Where's the morality? I'm just curious what you all thought about that.
Oh, she was 20 something, 6 or 7. she was much older. I think she was pretty honest. I mean, she talked about the difficulties that they went through when he was gone so much, and she was on her own with the kids and trying to work. And she was working. I wrote this down today because I thought it was just such a great thing to say. And she really said it related to both of them. It was later in the book, but she said she feels they felt an obligation not to be complacent. And I think they felt, with all the opportunities they had and what they had gained through education, that they wanted to use that to do some good. But I can't imagine a lot of people would hold against her the idea of living. Both my children did that. I mean, it's not something I did, but I came around to accept that, this is the way it was going to be now. But they're both over 40 now, so no idea. I think she was pretty honest. I think she was pretty honest about his pros and cons.
Yeah, as far as that was an interesting question, Annie. That I think through her entire time in the spotlight, and so it's like maybe 10 years or something through the campaign and throughout his presidency. She always tried to be really honest. And I don't think she could have written the book without being honest about that. And the other thing is, you know, the people who would hold that against her already disliked her.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, so it's like, who is she writing for?
That's a good point.
Well, in the interview, she talks about marriage, it takes work, you know, and that it's weddings and every, you know, at first you think it's all just so romantic and everything, but it's going to be ups and downs and it takes work.
Sure does.
I love the part, there's a part in the documentary where she's being interviewed by Gayle King and she talks about the marriage counselor she and Barack went to, and Gayle King says, I went to like 3 or 4 of them. They never did me any good. What's the name of yours?
What did you think of the Robinsons, of Michelle's parents, and how they raised their kids and how that influenced their lives?
Well, I think they can probably attribute a lot of their success to that beginning. I mean, that's partly what, you know, my dad was a file clerk and had gone through the 8th grade, and my mother had a high school education, but they really felt it was important for the 3 of us to get a higher education, and they couldn't help us very much financially to do that, but they sure made it clear that that's what they wanted for us and helped where they could, and, you know, had those rules and kept us busy enough to stay out of trouble. And I think that's what her parents did too.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing is they treated, I agree with what you said, but the other thing is how, you know, they treated their son and their daughter, their expectations for their son and their daughter were the same.
Oh,
And that isn't true for every family. And yeah.
Yeah, very true, very true. And also they, it sounded to me like they had discussions, you know, at their dinner table, that they were actually talking about current events and such, and that gave her a background also that I thought a lot of, when I hear people who are in higher positions talk about their family life, that always seems to come up, that they had intellectual discussions at the dinner table. So I think that was probably true.
I think she was.
They did raise 2 very sort of successful, high-profile people. I mean, her brother was a successful coach, and now he works for, what is it, one of the basketball teams. I mean, they're both very successful in sort of in high-profile jobs even.
Well, she said her voice was respected at home, around the dinner table, and everywhere, and she expected that in life then.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the mother again and how important the mothers are, since we've got Mother's Day coming up and everything. I hope to be exactly like my mother.
That's the mothers.
At the same time, nothing like her at all. Oh, it's like
Brian, what were you going to say, Brian?
Oh, I was just saying that I think they were treated like adults very early on. And it was an adults in a positive way that set those expectations higher for them. Where they weren't talked down to, or nothing was made sound kiddish or any like, it was at a level where they had to
treat them with respect.
Yep.
Yeah, and then it was reinforced by the schools that she went to too, because didn't she go to Whitney Young?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Think about the trip, the commute. What was
hour
it?
and a half
An
each
hour
way. Yeah.
Right.
That's
Kids still do
dedication.
that. Yeah.
A lot of kids do that today still. A lot of kids in Chicago.
Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible to think about.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting what we learned even just about the presidency that she described. She talked about, it said every evening 2 binders got delivered, one for me and a much thicker one for Barack. Each contained papers from our respective offices, which meant we were to read them overnight. I mean, that's like homework every night, and not easy homework either.
Yeah.
And then there was the one about the description of the motorcade. They carried blood for a transfusion. They had a sealed ventilation system. They had rubber-proof tires. Oh my gosh, you know, I just think it's a black limo, but it's like a armored tank and all these extra things just in case there's any kind of an emergency. I'm thinking, wow, that is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I found that very interesting too, just all those little tidbits about the actual president, you know, the house, all the details were kind of fun to pick up on.
Right.
You know, the details were fun, but I remember thinking too, think of how many extra people are involved in her life all the time, always there. I mean, that part would be really difficult for me to have somebody else there for everything. It made it better, I'm sure, but to me, it would be in the way.
Right. Well, she even admitted that because I think after a while they had to give up going to church just because everything, like the church that they would go to, that had to be all secured. All these people had to go along with them. And you think, okay, we don't want to put everybody through this. So we're just not going to go to church anymore. So, I mean, that would be a hard thing to give up for some people, is not being able to go to your church. Although none of us can go to our church right now, can we?
So did any, this is on a different topic, but did anyone else feel that there was a lack of description or attention given to her time at Harvard? I mean, everything else was so, all of her other schooling seemed to be so detailed. And then suddenly she was a lawyer.
So during her law school years, you mean, Linda?
Yeah, she never seemed to discuss anything about the law school years.
Yeah.
I bet
So
those
I
were
just thought it was kind of
Yeah.
odd. I'm not sure why she did it.
grad school and law school is probably very boring, where if you're studying all the time, then you're probably not doing much else. And that's probably where the details lack in that area.
Maybe. I just wondered if she was downplaying the whole Harvard aspect of
I
being a
wonder
Harvard lawyer.
I wonder if it's because she did spend time talking about the transition to, was it Princeton she went to?
Yes, Princeton.
Just that, and that's another thing I related to. When I went to college, I went from this little tiny town with blue collar town to a small private college where in Ohio, where most of the students came from the East and came from very different income level. And that whole change and transition and fitting in thing was very interesting to me. So I think since she had talked about her Princeton years, maybe by the time she was hitting, law school, she was in the flow. She, had kind of gotten over that feeling of not fitting, and so didn't spend a lot of time. And as Brian said, probably didn't have a lot to say except I studied a lot.
But you're right. She doesn't talk much about it. In fact, I kind of had forgotten she went to Harvard until part of the documentary she mentioned something.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's really not touched on at all. And it was interesting to hear about going to Princeton and all the adjustments and just things she encountered there.
And her brother had gone there, so
Yeah.
she would have had at least heard stories about it specifically. I can't imagine though, as a college freshman, your roommate transferring out because you're Black. I mean, how would you get over that?
Well, I think she said she found out later.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. I read in the New York Times that she did not know it at the time. She didn't know it until the mother and the daughter were interviewed later, and they said that's why she transferred
Right.
out. So Michelle Obama said she was blissfully unaware of the reason her roommate transferred.
Right.
Can you imagine being that roommate now?
Yeah.
Or that guidance counselor in high school that said she wasn't Princeton material.
Right.
Yeah.
Now they're seeing Michelle, and that would be a little odd.
And they're in the book.
I just thought that was great that, that was one incident that led to, I think, her being able to go back to University of Chicago and help set up program to say, that was interesting where she went and he said, you mean you've never been here before? And she went out and she said, no, no one ever, thought this was for me. And so she started a program to get out in the community and get them out in the community and get over their fear of leaving this campus and integrating themselves more into the neighborhood. What a great thing. I just thought that was wonderful. And getting more children interested in perhaps saying, hey, maybe I can go to University of Chicago.
Yeah. She said that doors were open for her and she was opening doors for others.
Right.
What did you think about when she talks about the swerves in life? What did that mean? Did you like that analogy? Or?
Oh yeah, I know what that means.
Have you had some swerves, Jane?
That was another thing I related to is this idea of, if I'm perfect and I do everything great and I keep achieving, and then people will like me and I'll be okay. But you're afraid to get off that path if you're doing really well at something and trying something totally different because, well, what if I fail? What's going to happen? So that was really interesting. And but good for her, she did. She got off the path. No one else swerved.
Well, I guess she really swerved when she got to the White House.
Yeah. I have friends that swerve all the time. They never had a path. We see that too. There is no path. They are just constantly swerving. So, it's nice to know somebody that's kind of focused and yet is able to get off and do what needs to be done kind of thing. So, yeah.
But that was interesting too to think about, like, okay, she had to leave a high-paying career to do her swerve. Right. How much she needed to pay off these loans and everything she had. So.
Yeah. When they were in the White House, they were still paying off their loans, weren't they?
Well, it was until he wrote his books. That's what allowed that. That's when they had enough money so that they could pay off their loans.
Right.
Yeah.
When he wrote The Audacity of Hope.
They were in the White House and then when they finally got their loans paid off, I think, my gosh,
I think I was when I was 50, I quit my job, which was a pretty good job in the computer science industry, to go back to school to get my teaching certificate. And my first job teaching, I was making half of what I had made.
Welcome to the teaching world. Welcome to the teaching world.
Yeah.
That was a swerve.
I'm still fighting that now in our little community. Trying to improve that.
Well, talking about Barack writing his books, didn't he go off like for months and just left the family so he could write which I guess he needed to do that because they needed the money, but.
Yeah, he went to Bali.
Right. He went to Hawaii, didn't he? Had family there.
Yeah, and I think he also wrote the book because he had political ambitions, and that is kind of except for our current president, often that's a precursor for running for a higher office. Although, yeah, he wrote books too, but yeah, so I mean, I think it was for the money and to further his political ambition.
Has anyone read any of Barack's books?
I've read both of them. Well, I've read 2. Maybe he's got more, I don't know.
Yeah, I read the first one.
He wrote then a second one. Something about, was it about hope? I can't remember.
The Audacity of Hope.
Yeah.
His second book. Do you have it there, Tracy?
Sorry, what?
Do you have the names of his books, Tracy?
The Audacity of Hope was the more recent one. Yes. And Dreams of My Father was
I read that.
The first one. Yeah.
Both
and apparently there will be one on the way. There is a deal for his presidential memoir. So.
I hope so.
Yeah. So if a presidential memoir comes out by Barack, Is anyone interested in that?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a question that's on topic, but a little bit off. Other first ladies have written books. Has anyone read any of the others?
Yeah. Your mom was just doing a video chat or whatever you call that, Zooming. With,
Let's see. No, I don't think I have.
Didn't Laura Bush write children's books?
I thought she also wrote a memoir. I thought.
Yeah, she probably did. That's a good question.
And then the question is, why did everyone read this one? I don't know. I read this when it first came out. So, you know, it's like, what makes people want to read this one versus others?
Well,
Yeah, that's
word of
the
mouth if it was really good.
I think I just have more time now, for one thing. And I probably wasn't interested in reading some of the others it depended on the person. And it, you know, I don't know if Hillary did she write a memoir as First Lady? I was probably busy at the time. Didn't read it.
I think she did.
Wasn't she for a while the most popular woman in America?
Maybe, yeah.
Hillary?
Think,
yeah, no.
Oh, Michelle?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think she's just, I think lots of people admire her. And I mean, I do. So I'm eager to read about kind of what makes a person tick that you admire.
I think too that she's different enough from other first ladies. It's just, it was sort of inherently, in addition to admiring her, and she seems like an interesting person. I think just her life is so different. I mean, to read about Laura Bush's life, and Pat Nixon, or whatever. But I think her difference. Not only, many of us know that she came from not a lot, and in addition to being a person of color, and here she is, the First Lady. I just think all of that together makes it very interesting to pick up her book. Plus, she's articulate and can write well. And others are much more just about, well, I guess I'll write a book. Hers seems to be something that is very American, especially in these days, where people can struggle simply because of who they are. And so I think it just is, I think it's appealing on so many levels. And
you're right.
And then just word of mouth continues the interest.
When I first heard about it, people talked about it as a book that was very hopeful, that it made you feel like there was hope for the future and people helping each other. And so I didn't read it as a Michelle Obama First Lady. I just read it as sort of someone who was giving back to people and encouraging others. When I talk about the book, I keep telling people it is not a political book. You don't have to be an Obama fan to read it. It's not politics. It's not her being First Lady. It's more than that.
I liked her programs with school children, being a former teacher, and there was such real programs that families could relate to. So that's kind of what piqued my interest at first. But I just thought she could relate to families so much more with the programs that she had.
I thought she was very multidimensional, and I think that's what drew me to it, along with everyone returning the book saying it was so great at the library. But sometimes also, when you hear people, they're very one-dimensional, like you're just the First Lady, or you're just something or other, you're just your career, where she really spoke about all the different facets of being a human woman in America.
Plus, I think that we had just so recently seen her, a lot of her, and she was very warm and she's humorous. I mean, I just knew that would be in the book as well, the humor and the warmth, and yeah, her vivacity, we just, can't believe it's only been 3 years. I miss her.
What years it is, yeah.
Did anybody go see her on tour?
No.
I didn't get to see her. No.
Tracy, did Jen say anything? Because Jen went and saw her in Milwaukee, right? Or
She did, yeah, and she took the boys. She's got 2 sons that she took. I don't remember any details that she said. I think it was an incredible experience, but beyond that, I don't remember details. But
I've seen that both she and Barack are supposed to be doing some commencement speeches via Zoom or something coming up.
Do they have plans to ever live back in Chicago?
I've heard they have not sold their, I looked that up today. They have not sold their Chicago home.
Right.
But they bought this place out in DC, so I don't know.
Is their younger daughter graduating this year from high school?
No, she graduated last year. She's at University of Michigan.
Yeah, because that's why they were staying originally.
Mm-hmm.
So she could graduate from high school.
They must still like it there.
Well, I Googled and they have pictures of their house, and it's beautiful.
I bet.
can see why you'd want to stay there.
So she talks about being the Mrs. that is defined by her Mr., being the wife of a political rock star. Do you think, or how do you think she remains her own person?
I think she became that while she was in the White House. I mean, even Barack always said, Michelle's more popular than me.
I think she did that a bit when she was first, when he was going and writing and being able to go work out and she couldn't. I think she had a reckoning with herself to say, I need to ask for the things that I need. And I think she's just continued doing that.
That's what she talks about in the documentary. When they did go to this marriage counselor, she was expecting to go, and the counselor would tell Barack that he needed to change because obviously she didn't need to change, but it was more that she needed to stand up for herself and make sure she could be her own person.
Well, it sounds like you started that in kindergarten, going back to that story. I mean, that is a personality trait that, you can swerve a little bit, but you don't swerve too much off your major personality, I don't think.
And she's a very independent woman. She's been independent her whole life with all the things that she has overcome. And I know other people have overcome a lot of things also, but she paved the way for a lot of different, I think, groups of women and people in general.
And she had some good mentors too when she went to some of those nonprofits and when she went to work for the city. The women that were already in those type of positions, they really, really helped her. So once again, mentorship, your teachers, if you find somebody who believes in you and can answer some of your questions, that is, I think, really, really important, and she was lucky enough to find those kind of people.
I think she sought those people out too.
Right.
You would make it a point
I don't
to
know.
find somebody.
Right.
I thought it was great too on that, like how when she knew she didn't want to be a lawyer and wanted to do more good like community work, but she didn't know what, and she was able to talk to a lot of people and kind of interview people and just try to figure that out.
Right.
Not many people would do that or have the luxury to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the things I liked about the documentary was that all of these people who were working with her and friends of her, it was a very diverse group, which I didn't know from the book. Which I thought was very interesting.
I liked how her mother, when she told her she had this quandary in life, how her mother just said, "Buck up, kid." And she wasn't pandering to it at all. And I thought that was a good thing too.
Good role model.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the story with she learned to play piano on a flawed piano and then couldn't play on the perfect one. What kind of tale does that?
I know that story. That's because we had an old upright, and some of the ivories were pieces might be missing, or it was stained, or something here and there, and so it wasn't a nice white keyboard. And when you got to the recital in the Union Hall, and there was a nice white keyboard, you couldn't find your keys.
Thank God her teacher came up, her instructor, and showed her where middle C was.
It was her aunt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was another important influence on her, was the aunt who demanded perfection.
Robbie. Robbie. That was a funny story. Yeah, a lot of relatable things.
Why do you think she chose the title of Becoming?
I'm going to let somebody else answer.
Hey, you're making me laugh.
I think she talked about it in the foreword.
I think that's kind of her philosophy of life, is that you're always changing, you're always becoming something else or something different. And you don't have to define yourself and put yourself into categories. You can always become something else, do something else. I think that's kind of her life philosophy.
Right. Well, if you read the very last paragraph in the epilogue, it's all about, and her last sentence is, "This for me is how we become." And she talks about a lot of those things. So her very last paragraph in the epilogue really goes to why it's become, or becoming, I guess I should say.
I could listen to the epilogue. I listened to a lot of it, and then I read, so I flip-flapped back and forth. And I think the epilogue could have been at the beginning of the book too.
Yeah.
And it could have, where that could have led into the book as well. But it was a good end.
It was.
Great, yeah, good ending.
Did anybody else?
Did she read the book aloud?
Yep, on Audible, she read the book. So she is very eloquent in her reading. She did a very nice job of reading it.
Yeah, she did. She did. I did audio as well, and I really liked that part of it, that she read it.
I think it added a more of a human side to it rather than someone else reading it.
Yeah.
I always like when the author reads it, because then you hear the inflections that they make.
Yeah.
How does anyone remember that kind of detail from their life all throughout? Because she's so detailed, and I think, how do you know all that?
That was the thing that amazed me totally too. I couldn't believe
I don't
get it.
Yeah.
She said she kept journals, or she mentioned journals, so maybe she looked back at her journals. And she's a lawyer, so maybe she's super detail oriented. Some of the journals.
Well, she also had her brother and her mother to call upon for their memories.
And she's younger.
Yeah, she's younger than a lot of us.
Have as many memories to worry about. We have.
And I think too, the very art of writing will help you recall. I think if you started to write a story, say about something that occurred in the 8th grade, you remember the incident. I think the more you think about it and the more you start to write details, the more your memory will start to fill in. I don't mean make things up, but it starts to slide in. And if you're already a word person, which lawyers frequently are, and she seemed to be extremely articulate and voice what she thought, I think it sort of slides into place, and it's a practice more than simply, then right on the surface all the time. And of course, I think you would choose stories that you remembered.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's also critical with the family members chiming in, but I do think it comes along.
And if she kept journals, then she probably was recording things that were really more critical in her life. So she had all those ideas to fall back on. You know, it's one thing to have days when you were in first or second grade, but if you kept a little journals or a diary at that time, I know I've found my old diary and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can remember that. And that was years ago. So I think if she was a journal writer, she had references to kind of have that mindset to go back to some of those things.
Yeah, it is amazing what a journal can show you. I found one, we last fall, we went to Ireland, and I had been to Ireland before in 1975. And so I reread that part about Ireland. I went, oh my gosh, I don't remember half of this. And I know I didn't make it up.
Probably helps to have a good editor too, I'm sure.
Yes.
True. Yes.
I think she mentioned people that she had talked to when she was writing this. I think she made note of that a couple times.
Mm-hmm. We teach, there's even in school, like in 5th grade, they work on memoirs and they start writing a memoir. I don't know if Tracy did. Bobby did.
Not yet, but good to know we've got that coming.
They concentrate on the details and the stories and what makes up their important aspects of their life. So there's a definite art to that writing though too. So.
Yeah.
Now we are meeting and we are reading right now in a different time than when this book was written and everything that's happened. Do you feel that affected when you were reading at all?
Well, it was good to have the time. I
there?
felt like I totally enjoy it because there wasn't anything else to do. I didn't feel like I could just immerse myself in that book. It was wonderful.
Good.
I found myself missing, life that she talks about, the crowds gathering for the elections and, that very moving scene when they came to accept or when he had won in there in Chicago and the crowd is waiting.
Yeah.
And they pull up and the street's empty and the children are saying nobody's here and they realize it's because the Secret Service has cleared the streets for them and they walk in and there's what they say 2 million people was that or is it 200,000? I guess 200,000.
It's a lot.
I think 200,000. And I mean, what a beautiful scene that was of all these people weeping. It was with joy. That was just a
beautiful night.
I think I think as I read it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think as I was reading it, it is a hopeful book. I think it did give me hope, and I've started another book that's written in a similar vein. It's more of a history, but it's about a similar idea, and that is all the things that our country's gone through in the past, starting way back when, Revolutionary War, and these similar sorts of what I think are in a terrible time right now in terms of the way our country is not operating, and that it'll be okay. That we just have to, as they say, have an obligation not to be complacent. That we have to. It's like marriage; you have to work at it. So it gave me some hope.
Oh, good. Catherine, was there something you were saying?
Yeah, no, I took your question as not being so immediate as like this month or last month, but more like just the different politics. And it certainly made me sad that those days are over. I mean, you can't read that book without comparing what politically the world is like now, or this country is like now, as it was when Obama was in power or was president. And I just made those comparisons throughout the whole, just the policies and the concerns of the national government now versus then. It made me hope that that's coming back.
That kind of leads to another question I came across when I was reading it. Michelle kind of felt Obama was rushing. She kind of talks about she was hoping he'd kind of take a slower path and not just run right for the president. How, kind of makes you wonder, this is maybe a dangerous question to even ask or think about, but what would it have been like if he had taken a slower path, if he didn't run until 2012 or 2016 for president?
Wow.
Yeah.
So if he hadn't. Gosh. Let's see, who did
He might have had Hillary.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah,
And
she
we
would have
still
gotten
gotten Trump, or would Obama have followed? It's, you never know, but.
You wonder if, there's something to the theory about the pendulum, and because he was African American and there's still this racism that pervades our country, whether we admit it or not, whether this administration is a pendulum swinging in the opposite direction. And, so maybe it wouldn't have sprung, if people thought he was left, now we're way right. Now, maybe there wouldn't have been such the division now because of that. But who knows? I mean, I'm glad for the advances he made, but yeah, who knows?
Tough question, Tracy.
What you thinking?
You always ask the tough questions.
Tracy, can I ask you a library question?
Of course.
Those of us that want the next book, how do we go about getting it in this day of closed library?
Ebook.
Yeah, right now, luckily the next book, the Michael Perry book, I had it here and I think my husband stole it, is available electronically. And if you need help, I can help walk you through that if you need to, but it is on Hoopla and it is on Libby.
What is the title, please?
Population 485 by Michael Perry.
It's a faster read.
It is, and it's light and mostly fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been on a hold for that through Libby for 6 weeks.
Oh
So
dear.
I'm hoping I'm getting close.
Try Hoopla. I think it's available on both. I've got a list.
Jane, you're muted, Jane.
Jane Whitney is?
Yeah.
It's available on Hoopla.
It's available on Hoopla. Last I checked, it was both the ebook and the e-audiobook.
Okay.
Yeah, I put it on hold on Overdrive, and I think I was 11 on 4 copies, something like that.
Yeah, that list is a little long. But.
I at times use this great book used book site called Abe Books, ABEBOOKS. I can get a lot of different books for around $4 if you're not averse to buying a used book, just so you're able to read it for the book club, and then you give it to the library and they use it in their book sales.
Yes.
So you might try Abe Books.
It is available on Abe Books. I looked and it was available for about $3.95 with free shipping.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Okay.
And if you don't care about getting a very good copy, if you don't, qualities, you can say what quality you want. You might even get it for less.
Well,
Now,
right
the
after
Spurgeon Bay Library
reading,
is open for pickup. Any thoughts of any of the other ones doing that?
Not yet, I don't think.
I can speak to that a little bit. So since the library is a government entity, we're opening in the phases that the government has set up. So as the phases go through the opening, we may see that, but it's dependent on how we work through the phases of what the governor has set up.
so how does this work? Do you check? How does the book get checked out to you? I guess is what I'm wondering.
For pickup service?
Right.
So you have to call in. You can't go on InfoSoup to put it on hold like you might have in the past. But you want to go to InfoSoup to see if it's available. It has to be an item that's at the Sturgeon Bay Library branch. It physically has to be in the building. There's no book service traveling between libraries.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
It's the way it used to be. Before all, you know, those of us who are old remember this.
going backwards instead of forwards.
No consortiums.
No.
So if you go on InfoSoup and you find something that's at the Sturgeon Bay branch, it'll say available next to it, even if it says temp closed. If there's a due date or a date, then that means it's currently checked out. But if you go on and then make your list and then call, on Mondays and Wednesdays are when orders can be placed via phone, and between 9 and 5. And then after you can have 5 items for each call or each order per library card. So if you have multiple members in your household, you can have, you know, more than 5 books. And then you will be given a time slot to come pick it up on Tuesday and Thursday.
And then you can
Thank
keep it.
you.
How long can you keep it?
The due dates right now are after the beginning of June. So I think it's like June 7th, some are June 1st. So, and then what would happen is you call with your library card and you'll give your library card over the phone, and then it will be checked out to you. And so you will come at your appointed time and then pick up a bag of your items, and then it'll already be checked out to you.
So Tracy, do you know, so that the book after Population 485 is The Dutch House? And I suspect that is going to have a long, do you suggest we get on a list for that now? Because it'll take, do you have an idea of how readily available or not that is right now?
Yeah, I would. And I would, you know, who knows what things are going to look like going forward. So I would get on a list for an electronic copy too.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's one you could place on hold or not right now. The library system has kind of suspended some holds just so that we're not overwhelmed when we go back. So I'm not sure on that, but you can try, and you can certainly get on the list for the ebook. I'm on the list for the e-audiobook, and then it's kind of nice on Libby, you can kind of suspend your hold too. So I could get that now, but I've suspended it so that other people can get it, and then, you know, when I'm ready, I can check it out. So that's a nice feature that they have.
And I would say it's worth asking when you call the Sturgeon Bay branch to order books, if you are interested in reading that now, because some of the items that are coming, there's still books being bought for all the branches. And so if it's at the library at the Sturgeon Bay branch, we can check it out to you, even if it's another copy to another Door County library. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just put it on hold on overdrive from the Palm Beach County Library System, where I actually have a number from the winter, and I'm 194 on 62 copies. So that's what the Dutch House is doing right now.
And that one is not inexpensive on my used book site. It's too popular, too new.
And for audio fans, Tom Hanks is the reader, which is wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah, we may have to evaluate how things are going, and we may have to adjust some of our schedule too if we're not able to get the books. I don't think we need to make any changes just yet, but we'll wait and see what happens.
Sounds good.
Any last thoughts on Michelle Obama's book?
Did you see her daughters today on the news? Pretty girls. Really pretty girls.
I do kind of wonder like what their lives are like now and what the future will hold for them.
Well, I'm going to listen to the video as soon as we go off the air here. Sounds interesting.
We talked a lot of good things. Anything you didn't like about the book?
Well, I can't think of anything. Good. I thought it was very good. I thought it was very encouraging. She just, I think she really was trying to encourage and build hope for people and say, keep going.
Nobody,
All right,
nobody
ladies and
has.
gentlemen, I'm going to sign off. Nice to see you all.
Thanks for joining,
See you
Karen.
all too. Thank you very much, Tracy.
Adios.
Thanks for letting me be a
Thanks,
part.
Tracy.
Good to see everybody.
Thank
Glad
you,
no one
guys.
was coughing.
Bye.